So years ago, when I started my company, I think I was all about being successful, and I was ambitious, and I wanted to grow this enterprise and be known as, this guy that created something out of nothing. Um, as life would have it, things change as you get older. And while my hair is black today, it's not always black. Sometimes it's kind of gray. And so the more gray that I get, the more that I think about things differently. So for me today, when I think about my legacy and where I want things to go, and it's interesting because it's almost like one of the interview questions I ask. One of the questions, when people meet with me, I say, well, when your grandchildren stand above your grave, what is it that you want them to say about you? And so for me, what that means today is I would love for them to say that, Tirrell Whittley was generous, that he was kind and he was giving, that he had high integrity, that he showed accountability, that when someone called, he responded, and he was a good friend, father, husband, person. I put a lot of stock into the things that you can't touch and feel today. And part of that happened because as an entrepreneur, and for those entrepreneurs in the room, you go through ups and downs. And I was telling some folks earlier, I heard this earlier today as I was working out. It's a podcast, and it talked about how sometimes you hear about someone's success and how they climbed the ladder, but what they don't tell you is all the pitfalls and all the times they slipped off the ladder and all the times things didn't go right, or when the money wasn't there, or when they were in their closet like I've been. I was praying. I was like, Jesus, if I could just get through payroll this month, if I could just get through payroll this month. And those moments matter when you talk about success, because you can't get to success, in my opinion. Every entrepreneur doesn't get to success without going through those moments. For me, and then I'll stop after this, one specific moment is several years ago. As a matter of fact, it was 10 years ago, 2013. My company was a rocket ship at that moment. We were out of here. We had just launched some great films. We had signed Walmart. We were doing all this wonderful stuff. And I clearly remember going into the doctor's office. I had my physical, and he says, hey, you have some elevated numbers. And I was diagnosed with cancer, specifically prostate cancer. For the men in the room, check your PSA numbers. And I remember going to the car. The first person I called was my dad. And my dad had also been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and he had surgery. And the reason why I was going through this physical is because I was going to do a little bit of early detection. And my dad and I sat there and cried in the car. He felt like it was his fault. I felt like I didn't know how this happened. And I remember the testament between the two of us was, even though bad things happen, it's not about the thing, but it's about how you respond to the thing. Your response matters, right? So bad things are going to happen to us all. But in my company, one of the mantras that I use regularly, and as a matter of fact, it's actually a patch on, we have company Letterman jackets. It says attitude and effort. And I tell people regularly, there's two things that you control every morning. Every morning you have I don't have control of the sun coming up. I don't know if it's going to be rain, snow, sleet. I don't know, sometimes even with the alarm clock, I'm not sure if I'm going to wake up at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock. I don't know if I'm going to hit snooze. But I do know this, that if God allows my eyes to open, I am in absolute control of my attitude, and I am in control of my effort. Those two things are in my complete control. He's giving me the will for that. And those things, I think that resonates with me.
I love that. Speaking of, I got 3 words: response, attitude, and effort. You're a native of Milwaukee, so Midwest over here, at Milwaukee to Tallahassee, and then to Atlanta. Tell us about that journey, especially how we're going from a Milwaukee native to FAMU to now getting into leading in such a massive way in marketing.
So I'll keep the story short. I am originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Anybody from Wisconsin? Absolutely not. Go Pack Go. Go Pack Go. Any Packers fans? Nope. Okay, go.
That's why I said Midwest. I was trying to give you a Midwest vibe here.
Listen, I'm a proud Packers fan. My wife is from here, from Georgia. We showed up to the last home game, and we were on opposite sides with different jerseys. But it was interesting. It was very interesting. I was what they call a young entrepreneur in Milwaukee. I have a twin sister, and I was telling some people how my parents, they love my twin sister. They love her. Name is Tiffany. They love Tiffany. They like me. They like Tirrell, but they love Tiffany. And it's a known thing in our household. I know y'all love Tiffany, so and I let it go. So early on, I had to find ways to make money if I wanted to enjoy life. In the simple things, if I just wanted to go out, or if I wanted to hang out with my friends and buy tennis shoes or play basketball, I had to have these things, or even attend a basketball game. I had to have my own money. So my father was a supervisor for the transit system. My mom worked at Sears in their distribution center. So we come from a lower middle class family, and I decided to do some creative things. Number one, I created a barbershop in the basement. For any of those with dads from the 1960s, early 70s, my dad had a stereo. He had the large bar with the diamond cuts out with the red. I had the high chairs. My basement was nice. This was a player's level basement. So my dad allowed me to have the basement. I set up a barbershop. I had 3 chairs. I would allow 2 other guys to come and cut. I only charged $7. The guys had to pay me $2 if they cut, so they walked away with $5, and I would get 2 for them being able to be in the chair. And I would have all the guys in the neighborhood. They would come in on Friday nights and on Saturdays and get haircuts. And that was a great way to make money. And then, of course, I cut grass some days. And then because it's Wisconsin, I would snowblow in my neighborhood. So I became very aggressive with trying to figure out ways to make money. And that was my entrepreneurial start. And so the great thing is, it stuck with me. Some entrepreneurs are born, some are made. And I believe I was born with that kind of spirit. And so when I got to FAMU, was enjoying, well, let me tell this little bitty story. So I got there, and on the 3rd day of being on campus, I go to a place called the Orange Room, and there's a young lady coming out of the Orange Room. It was her 2nd day on campus. And I walked up to her, introduced myself. 31 years later, she's my wife. And we have 2 daughters. I have a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old. And as you could imagine, they're at FAMU right now. And I do sit on the board of directors of FAMU as well. So when I got to FAMU, I felt at home. I was originally supposed to go to DePaul University. My sister was supposed to go to Marquette. We took a trip down to FAMU, and there was this woman named Dean Sybil Mobley. And for those that know who Dean Sybil Mobley is, she was a powerhouse dean of their business school, one of the most impressive people I've ever met. And she, in that moment of that visit, convinced myself, my sister, our parents, everybody, we're coming to FAMU. And she's like, you guys belong here. And we did. So while I was there, I pledged the greatest fraternity that's ever existed, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Yes, indeed. And right after pledging, I connected with some of my fraternity brothers, and we created a company. And so I started another company. I had a graphic design company So remember, I said some are made, some are just born. It's just in my blood. So I started this graphic design company, and we were doing little things at first, like flyers for parties on campus. But I told the guys, I was like, "There's so much more here. Like, we got to do bigger and better." Remember, and that's the ambitious spirit that sits inside of me. So we got a client who dealt with minor league baseball. Minor league baseball in Florida is everything. And so we stepped into the minor league baseball space, and we started creating all of their jerseys, hats, T-shirts, all of their promotional items. We were designing all of this stuff. Now, these are I think we might have been 19 and 20-year-olds. And in that first year, we did $500,000.
Wow.
And when you're 19 and 20 and $500,000 shows up, and you're not used to it. I'm not a professional athlete, and I don't have agents and people around me. We just lost our minds. And I remember they lost their minds a little bit deeper than me. They said, "Hey, Tirrell, we want to go out and buy 3 Lexus trucks and call that marketing and advertising. And that's going to be like our out-of-home billboards." And I was like, "Okay, this makes no sense." So I kind of pushed back from that a little bit, and I started another company called Midnight Online, which was a web development company. Websites were just starting. This was 1995. Just starting. And to have a website was vanguard. It was just so posh if you had a website. So we created these really great websites with all of this stuff and movement. And I remember it like yesterday. I remember seeing a little email for all the AOL people spinning in the background and clicking the email. And so we created these websites, and it was great to launch that company with 2 other frat brothers. Did really well, and then I decided to do consulting. And Gold's Gym hired me to consult to get college students to basically join Gold's Gym. Now remember, there's 3 universities or 3 colleges in Tallahassee. There's FSU. FSU, now they have a really, really nice gym over at FSU. But then there's FAMU, Florida A&M University. Gym is okay, but not that great. Then there was Tallahassee Community College. So I hit all 3 administrations, all 3 campuses, and I quadrupled the membership at Gold's Gym in a very short period, in 1 semester. Wow. Gold's Gym, they put me under a retainer. The retainer it started at $5K. It ended up at $15,000 a month. And I was a college student. Right. And so it really is in my blood. I was like, this is great.
Right.
And so I bought a car. For those that like cars, a 1991 Ford Probe GT 2.2 liter turbo engine.
Oh, wow.
It was nice.
Uh-huh.
And I enjoy, and the great thing was I never had to ask my father or my mom for cash for the car. I went out and was able to buy the car. And I remember when I pulled up, my dad asked me, "How did you get," and this is when I went home that summer. He's like, "How did you get home? Like, did you take the bus?" And I was like, "No, I drove home." And he was like, "What the?" And so he runs out, he looks at the car, and for all the fathers in the room, I am too, first thing he does is he's like, let me check out the tires. This used car is not quite what I thought. I got to go check it out. And I knew then, I was like, he just wants to drive the car. So college was great, and entrepreneurship was in my blood. But remember that young girl I met on her second day, my third day? Well, I wasn't quite certain at that time, even with my entrepreneur spirit, could I really sustain her and myself? So I decided to go out into corporate America, and I'm degreed in accounting. I have an accounting degree, which is the foundation of business for all young people, is the foundation accounting. And from there, I got hired in the IT. I did accounting for a minute. I did auditing, did budgeting. Then I learned I don't like accounting. I was like, I don't know if I like this. And IT was paying really well. And I did a small stint in Houston, Texas with Lyondale Pharmaceuticals. And then this company recruited me called SAP. Anyone here uses SAP? Heard of SAP?
The Concur, right? SAP Concur.
They own Concur,
Yeah.
but SAP is a huge enterprise software. Interesting enough, in 99, 2000s, people would pay hundreds of millions of dollars for software that didn't work. SAP didn't work. And so then you have to hire all these consultants to make it work. And so I was a platinum consultant. SAP hired me to do business intelligence and strategic enterprise management. The great thing is I had benefits. And we could go to the doctor and do things. And so that was wonderful to know that I could sustain her. But business and entrepreneurship was calling. So I became what they call a passionpreneur. So a passionpreneur, for those that aren't aware, is someone that really stretches out on their entrepreneur spirit while having a full-time job. Some people call it a side gig. I call it passionpreneur. And I launched Liquid Soul in that spirit. Liquid Soul, and at the time, this is 2001. In 99 and 2000, for us that have a little bit of gray hair, a lot of folks were jumping ship in my industry, specifically in chemicals and petrochemicals, and they were starting websites. It was the .com boom. So I would be sitting next to a guy one day. The next day, he's gone. He got $20 million, and he's creating a website in the .com space. Then there was Y2K. I had tons of consultants making money off of Y2K left and right. I had to stay still because I had just gotten married. I was 24, 25, had just gotten married and built a house. And I had to sit, and that's another testament, is that I was able to buy a house at 25 years old. And I had to sit still because I was like, wow, this is a lot to cover. I got a wife, a house, cars, and I'm 25 years old. Let me be easy. But when I became 26, I was like, it's time to go. And so SAP hired me. I started my passionpreneur of Liquid Soul, but I wanted to do something in new media. And so Liquid Soul started as Liquid Soul Radio. It was an online digital radio platform. We had 24 channels of music, everything from salsa to merengue to hip hop to soul. And I had 16 music directors. I poured a lot of money into this. 16 music directors around the company. It effectively was Pandora, right? You could customize your music. And this was, again, back in 2001, 2000 as a matter of fact. And it didn't work because none of the advertisers would spend money with me. As much as of an infrastructure I created, I actually went out and then did a partnership with XM Satellite Radio. So we were one of the first online and satellite broadcasters. We competed with Yahoo Radio and AOL Radio. We had over 2 million listeners a day on Liquid Soul Radio. But no advertisers would spend money. I only got 3, Pepsi, Motorola, and Denny's. And Denny's had to spend money with me. They were in trouble. So they had to spend money with me. It didn't work as well as I would have hoped. So we then created a concert series, which kind of took off. And then I created Liquid Soul Media, which is the actual marketing company. And it was to do advertising for those 3 clients. And this is supposed to be a short answer, right?
It's fine. It's
Right.
fine.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So
I got 2 more questions for you.
Great.
Go ahead.
So the way the story goes, and I'll fast track it. While in school, I had these 2 fraternity brothers, line brothers, a guy named Will Packer and Rob Hardy. So these 2 guys shot a movie called The Gospel. In The Gospel, you had Idris Elba, Boris Kodjoe. Those were the 2 leads. And small movie, a $4 million film. Sony Pictures put the money up. And Will and Rob, and they gave Will and Rob $500,000 to basically go away because they were bugging them, saying, hey, we want to market our movie. Well, Will and Rob came to me with $500,000 and said, hey, Tirrell, we got $500,000. We need to market a movie. What can you do? I was like, with $500,000? I could do a lot. And we did a lot. We created all these websites and digital cards and did events and had church fans and at events. And before Sony looked up, The Gospel was now tracking on their radar and on all the studios' radar based on its awareness. And Sony didn't know how it happened. And so Will and Rob, remember now, Will and Rob paid me to create and do all of this. Now the movie's tracking. Sony says, okay, we need to buy the assets from Liquid Soul. And so I didn't even know how much to charge them. Because now this major studio has to buy back what somebody already paid me to build. It's like, this is the first and last time this has happened. We got paid twice. And so, but I knew I messed up when the guy from Sony, this is the president of marketing, says, how much for the website? I said, $25,000. And he says, great, check will be in the mail tomorrow. And he hung up. And I knew I shot too low. I was like, man, we should have said 35 or something. So anyway, that started a great relationship. From there, we started marketing film and television, and I took Liquid Soul Radio and I kind of pushed that down. I actually sent letters to to Denny's, Motorola, and Pepsi. And I actually said to them, thanks for being great clients, but we're no longer going to be able to work with you. And at the time, I had 4 employees, and this is for anyone that's a passionpreneur as well. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions, and you got to get dedicated. And I said to my staff, and you have to be focused. I said, we're going to focus on just doing film, because they had never seen an agency do what we did. And remember, I got paid twice. I was like, we're just going to focus on film. Well, that $4 million investment in that movie, the movie opened up to $8 million. It was number 5 at the box office. It went on to do $16 million in the theaters, and then it did another $16 million in DVD sales. So you had a $32 million return off a $4 million investment. This is Sony. They called us immediately and said, we have 6 other films for Liquid Soul. So we did. Thank you. We did those 6 films. All 6 of those films were either number 1 or number 2 at the box office. So you may remember Stump the Yard, This Christmas, First Sunday, Takers. We did excellent work for all of those films. The president allowed me to put out 1 press release, and they never let marketing agencies do press releases. So he said to me, will you write it, just send it to me. Great. And so I'm not a publicist, but I wrote this press release, and it sounded like that press release made Liquid Soul sound like diamond. I mean, we were golden and diamond across the board. And I just knew his staff was going to be like, okay, we got to change all of this. Well, obviously no one read it on his side of the table, because he sent it back and said, yeah, it's approved. I was like, great. We pushed out that press release, and then in less than a week, we got a call from Disney to do Princess and the Frog. We got a call from Lionsgate to do Precious. And then Fox called us and said, hey, we have a movie called The Secret Life of Bees and Notorious. And things just exploded. A little bit later, Tyler Perry called and said, hey, I got 2 television shows I need help with called Meet the Pains and House of Pain, Meet the Browns. And some years later, Empire, Fox called us and said, we need you guys to launch Empire. So the focus really is what's important, because I had to focus. And of course, during that period, I can't remember exactly what year, I had to leave SAP. I was no longer a passionpreneur. I had to leave and become a full-time entrepreneur, which later will become the name of my book, which is You Can't Be Excellent in Your Spare Time.
Really good.
Don't nobody steal that name. I'm going to trademark it, but you can't be excellent in your spare time.
I love that. Tirrell, final question as we wrap up here. You've talked about it a bit, but tell us about a time that you feel you failed forward.
So that's a great question. I can be very recent with this. So recently, we kicked off a project with Pfizer. And this is a research project. They've never done, this is a global women's research project to evaluate how women within Pfizer think about Pfizer. And we hired a team. I had researchers and everything got started. And I closed the deal, but after I closed it, the president took it. I kind of walked away and went on to work on some other stuff. And I was like, hey, these guys got it. Well, I was in an airport and I got a call from the leader at Pfizer that was leading this project. And effectively, she called to tell me that we're going to take you off the project. And I was I was completely dumbfounded and didn't understand what happened, didn't really have the backstory. And I felt that obviously we failed. Something really went, and because I walked away, I felt like, man, maybe I should have stayed a little closer to this as it was getting off the ground. But I knew I put the right people around the table, so it really confused me. And remember I said this earlier, that bad things can happen to you, but it's always about how you respond to it, not the thing itself. And so in that moment, I had to remind myself of my own words. And as I was talking to her, I said something very critical. And I said, well, this is the first time that I'm hearing about this. And I really wish you would have called me to give me some notice so that I could do the necessary course correction. And I feel as though that would have just been fair, because it's difficult enough to get a client like Pfizer, and it becomes a travesty to lose a client like Pfizer. And I could literally hear the thinking taking place on the other end of the phone. And her response back to me was, you know what, Tirrell, you make a very good point. And I said to her then that my commitment and what I commit within my company is to always show up with excellence. But I always realize sometimes excellence might not reach your bar, my excellence. So the opportunity to retool gives me a chance to level up. And thankfully, she came back and said, you know what, Tirrell? And I could tell it was a very slim opportunity. She said, I'm going to give you guys, an opportunity to come back. I called the president, debriefed. We had to find another research team to work with. And then less than 48 hours later, we had to repitch our strategy. So we go back. Now I'm fully engaged, as you can imagine. I don't want to lose Pfizer, so I'm fully into it. And we go back and we repitch this entire engagement. And afterwards, they do a debrief, and the same woman comes back and she says, you guys are going to keep the account. And she says, Tirrell, I must say, we were literally closing the door. And how you responded to me allowed you to get back to the table. But she says, once you got back to the table, she said, you guys showed out. And she said, it was beyond impressive what you guys have presented. And so now I not only leveling up, but now I felt like we exceeded. And so when I went back to my team, I was like, don't mess this up. I've done my part. Now we got to get this to the finish line. So I'm thankful that we went through the process. I think it helped all of us. Mm-hmm. I know it helped me because when someone tells you they're going to walk away from you, usually I think the natural instinct is to get a little upset, to feel like, well, why would you do this to me? Versus being measured, a little calm, and, in my opinion, saying, let me trust my instinct here and try to respond. It's not the situation. It's really about how I respond to the situation that's going to make a difference.
Yeah. Well, Tirrell, you are beyond impressive, and we want to say thank you so much for joining us, joining our leaders. We're incredibly grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me.
Tirrell Whittley, everyone.